September 24, 2024. Dear Caroline, here's a photo of my mother's father and mother, Julio and Elisa Hernandez. In this photo, my grandfather was about 19 years old, and my grandmother was 16 years old. One day, my grandfather, Julio, was riding his horse in the countryside of Quemado de Huines in the province of Villa Clara, Cuba. When my grandfather Julio first spotted this beautiful country girl, Elisa, it was love at first sight. They instantly fell in love and began the courtship ritual of visiting her as often as he could, under the careful supervision of Elisa's parents. There was no dating back then. Eventually, the courtship period finished and they finally got married. They bore 5 children as follows. My aunts, Isabel, who you have as a friend on Facebook, Blanca, or Tia Blanquita as we called her, Tia Carmen, Carmita, and your grandmother, Evelia, in that order of birth. The 5th child was my uncle Heriberto, the only boy, and the youngest of all. Now my grandfather Julio was born in 1903 to Silverio and Cristina Hernandez, who owned a dairy farm where they produced fresh milk for the local townspeople. They also grew sugar cane to sell sugar and molasses. They had numerous employees working for them, including Jamaican black people who traveled from the island of Jamaica to their farm in order to find work. These Jamaicans were not slaves, and they were paid generous wages. My grandfather Julio was a handsome and hard-working young man who was employed on his family's dairy ranch. There they also grew tomatoes, corn, yuca, boniato, and other native Cuban vegetables. My grandmother's parents were simply known as Mama Vieja and Papa Viejo. When my grandparents got married, they gave the new couple a plot of their land in order to build their new house. Keep in mind, these country homes were no luxury mansions. They had a palm thatch roof, dirt floors, no electricity, and an outside water well and toilet outhouses. Now, there was no schools in the countryside, so most children did not receive a formal education unless they moved to the big city, which was Havana in those days, and that's where I was born. Tragically, my grandfather Julio died early. After 6 or 7 years, I guess, of marriage, he was assaulted by a local criminal on his way to work. The criminal robbed my grandfather of all his money and then stabbed him to death. My grandmother, Elisa, was heartbroken, vowing never to marry again. She became a widow, a young widow at that, and had to work odd jobs to make ends meet and feed her 5 young children. Among other things, she washed and ironed clothes for other people in the village in order to make some extra money. She also cooked meals for other families as well. These meals were called cantinas and were packed in various layers of aluminum containers stacked on top of each other, each section containing a different part of the meal. For instance, one section contained the rice, another section contained the meat, and another section contained the yuca or fried plantains, and so on. The whole idea of the cantina brings back happy memories of my childhood. I wish someone would bring them back. When I was a young boy growing up in North Miami, I remember my mother buying these cantina meals from another Cuban lady in the neighborhood who was also a good cook and made extra money selling meals for other families. When my mother was tired and didn't feel like cooking, she would buy these cantina meals from this lady. So that's pretty much what my grandmother Elisa did in order to provide for her children. After all her 5 children grew up and moved to the United States of America, she finally decided to leave Cuba and come to the USA. In those days, she had to travel by way of Spain first in order to get to America. Unfortunately, she never made it. She caught pneumonia while in Spain en route to the USA and died there. She was just 64 years old and still a widow. Well, I hope you enjoyed this family history lesson. Save a copy of this for your future reference and also to tell your children. Give my love to my grandsons Julian, Evan, and Noah. God bless you all. Dad.